and I probably voted for as many Democrats as Republicans as third-party candidates. And I sort of used to believe this myth that people of our generation are never going to vote in big enough numbers for it to make a difference. At least growing up, that was always the image that we got, whether it was from MTV News or CNN. It was always, well, yeah, young people aren't going to vote. And yet, for some reason, we're always sold movies, and we're always sold music on iTunes, and how much money we're going to spend downloading this, and how much money are young folks spending on soda. So it was always really perplexing to me of that this issue of how our generation is or isn't voting. And for me, as an independent, like I said, as many Democrats as Republicans as third-party candidates for the most part, didn't really think a vote made a difference until about 4 years ago, when what? 4 years ago, I was living in Texas. Where are you from? All right, this story takes place in Houston. I don't lie, but I do like that as well. So I was living in Houston, and a buddy of mine was working this minimum wage job at a trucking company, and he was trying to save up money for college. And he was the guy who, at the end of the night, would cut up empty boxes and put them in the recycling bin, things like that. He really badly wanted to go to school. And he got a phone call one day at this place where he was working from a company called Halliburton. Do you guys know Halliburton? See, sometimes it's booze, but they went straight to the laughter. Sometimes it goes through, and then sometimes you'll have a couple people applauding, followed by some booing, and then followed by widespread laughter. Anyway, so you know what Halliburton is. So the point being, my friend who was working this minimum wage job so that he could raise money for college, he gets this phone call from Wilder, and the person on the other end of the phone said that they would pay him $90,000 for 1 year if he agreed to drive a truck in Iraq for this company, for the private sector. And so he called me, he called a couple of our other friends and said, what do you think I should do? This will obviously pay for all of college, it will probably pay for grad school if I can get in, and if I use the money in a wise way, I can probably put a down payment on a small apartment somewhere, so I'm basically set. And we realized pretty quickly that no matter what he decided, it was a pretty sad day that in the world's richest, most powerful country, the only two opportunities that a buddy of ours had to go to college was either minimum wage or $90,000 a year in a war zone. And so the cynical side of me got even more cynical, and I looked on the internet and read a couple of books about the political system and realized, probably for the first time, really actually realized that we've had two families in the White House for the last 20 years. And I think they've had some great ideas. I'll be the first one to say that. But I don't think they were able to get very much done. And I think if they had, then my friend wouldn't have to make this excruciating decision on how to pay for college. So that really made me feel like my vote mattered even less than it otherwise would have. This was back in 2004. 3 weeks after this phone call, I was watching television. I had the TV on in the background. The 2004 Democratic National Convention was on. I was checking my email. And from the TV in the background, I heard, especially after 9/11, we shouldn't be divided between blue states and red states. We should focus on being part of the United States. And I kind of looked up at the TV. And I looked at this guy, and I'm like, who's this guy with the big ears and the funny name? Why is he saying all these amazing things? They're really weird things. So I finished watching Senator Obama's keynote speech at the 2004 Democratic National Convention, and when he was done with it, he got that big standing ovation, and I thought, okay, well, this guy really needs to run for president. And from the size of this room, that obviously wasn't a very unique thought on my part. So a couple of years later, when the senator decided to run for president, the first thing I did was look at his platform and his history, asking myself what kind of experience does this guy have? Does the integrity from that one speech actually translate into something greater? And 3 things really stood out in my mind. The first has to do with my friend in Texas, and that was Senator Obama's $4,000 tax credit for every person who wants to go to college. And, Tim was saying we've been to 25 stops so far around the country, and in every place we're meeting people who, and this is probably some of you guys too, who, you might have 2 or 3 or 4 brothers and sisters, and your family has to decide which one gets to go to college. That's not something that's acceptable to Senator Obama, nor I think should it be acceptable to any of us. So under Barack's, what was just one component of it, Barack's education plan, It's a $4,000 tax credit for every person who wants to go to college. So if you have 10 brothers and sisters, and all 10 of you get into school, all 10 of you will get a $4,000 tax credit every year to get a higher education. So that was the first thing that jumped out at me, because it would have helped my friend in Texas a couple of years ago. The second was the senator's opposition to the Iraq War from the beginning. And I don't know how many of you know the story, but the senator now is the only major presidential candidate who has opposed the Iraq War from the start. And he was actually running for re-election in the Illinois State Senate when the Iraq War was starting up. And he read all the data on the war and said to his aides, this war is a bad idea. It's going to make us less safe. It's bad for our economy. It's certainly bad to send our troops into harm's way for no reason. And Barack's own aides said, Senator, it sounds like you're implying that you want to speak out against the war. He said, yes. They said, you can't. The war is testing at something like an 80 or 85% approval rating. If you speak out against this war, you're not going to get reelected. Barack looked at them and said something to the effect of, if lying about foreign policy is the only way to get reelected, then I don't want to get reelected. And he did go to an anti-war rally, and he did speak out against the Iraq War, and the infamous quote from then is, I'm not opposed to all wars, I'm just opposed to a dumb war. Pretty succinct now that we know what we know, but way back then that was actually a pretty significant statement to make. And so to know that now we have someone running for president who had the foreign policy insight and integrity way back then to know what we know now was important to me, and I'm sure for those of you who have friends or family overseas like I do, it's an important consideration to be made. And then the third was healthcare. This actually goes back to senior year in college. Incidentally, a room that was, I think, exactly the size. We could see like 400-ish, something like that. So this one big lecture that I had senior year, I was taking this class with a buddy of mine, and he realized that he needed glasses to see the board. Okay, well then go get yourself some glasses, and we'll take this class together. And he said, well, no, the type of financial aid that he was on didn't leave enough of a cushion. So he had to choose between getting eyeglasses to see the board or buying textbooks for his class. And a couple of us sat with him and did these strange mathematical equations where we calculated how much it would cost him to photocopy every page of the book in the library to see if he still had money left over to get glasses. What if he joined Costco so he could get the pre-made glasses? Would that give him enough money for his books? And at one point we just kind of realized this is an insane decision that this kid has to make. Why? This country has enough money to provide health care for people. Why does he have to make this decision? So, in looking at Barack's platform and realizing that the other candidates, I know everyone talks about health care, but I think it's time we stop talking about it. And Senator Obama already provided 150,000 kids and their parents with health care when he was an Illinois state senator. On top of that, he doesn't take any federal lobbyist money or PAC money for his presidential campaign. So when it comes time to formulate health care policy, what he's done has been done for people like us. The only people he's going to owe favors to when he becomes our president are you guys, not any sort of for-profit healthcare company. So that's what drew me in initially. That's what made me think, okay, well, I've got to do something because we're sort of on the verge of potential greatness. We can actually be proud of something in a way that we haven't in a very long time. So I decided, okay, Iowa was the first state to have their version of the primary back in January. And so in November, when I figured all this stuff out, I thought, all right, I'm going to take a weekend and I'm going to volunteer in Iowa. And help knock on doors and maybe do some survey work and help make phone calls. So I go to Iowa, and after a day and a half, I meet all these incredible volunteers and staff members, and I'm not necessarily suggesting that you do this, even though you do have a nice month ahead of you, but people that had dropped out of college and taken that year off to go work on the campaign. It was basically people that had sacrificed so much. I felt like I had no excuse. So I stayed longer. I stayed for about a month and a half in Iowa. And my disclaimer that I always give, which I will give you today, is that there was also a writer's strike in LA. So I had no job. So it's a little easier for me to take about a month or a month and a half in Iowa.